My own sister slammed her fist into my face, not in the chaos of war, but in an exclusive VIP lounge. Yet the blow that truly shattered me came from my mother. What could you possibly have done to make her this furious? They believed they were tossing out something worthless. They didn't realize they were hardening a soldier. My name is Lauren Carter. I'm 30 years old, a veteran, and tonight I was nothing more than a stage prop. The ballroom of the Magnolia Grand Hotel in Dallas glittered with chandeliers and the quiet hum of old wealth. The air was heavy with expensive perfume and the faint scent of ambition. Under the bright spotlights, my sister Kendall shined, a tech mogul, a celebrated philanthropist, and a master at bending the truth to fit her story. And tonight, I was her favorite prop. I owe so much of my drive to my amazing older sister Lauren. Kendall's voice rolled through the speakers, smooth and flawless like polished stone. Her courage and sacrifice in Iraq. It's the foundation on which we built the Valor Alliance Fund. Right on cue, a spotlight locked on me. I rose to my feet, the applause rolling over me like a warm tide I couldn't breathe in. I smiled. Not a true smile, but a mask I'd forged in foreign deserts and perfected at family dinners where silence was sharper than words. It was the expression of a disciplined soldier, hollow but convincing. When the clapping faded, Kendall descended the stage, gripping my arm with a possessive pressure. "Come on," she murmured, her public smile still flawless. She guided me out of the lavish ballroom, down a thickly carpeted hallway, and into the hushed VIP green room. Inside, a small group of carefully chosen journalists waited, eyes gleaming with a mix of awe and hunger. "Lauren's happy to share a few more details," Kendall announced in a tone that left no space for refusal, about how her combat experience directly inspired me to launch the fund. She was asking me to lie, to add another layer to her carefully manufactured heroism. The room seemed smaller, the air tighter. Pens hovered above notepads. My years of discipline urged me to comply, to play the part. But something deep inside, a stubborn spark that had survived worse, refused. "No," I said. My voice was soft, but in that expectant silence, it struck like a stone in still water. "I'm not doing that." Kendall's smile didn't fade. It vanished, swallowed by a black hole of fury. Her eyes, warm for the cameras moments ago, hardened into glacial shards. She dismissed the reporters with a flick of her hand. "We need a moment." The heavy door clicked shut, and the air thickened to something you could choke on. "What did you just say to me?" she hissed, her voice low and far more dangerous than a scream. She stepped toward me, her $10,000 gown whispering like dry leaves. "Who do you think you are, defying me?" It happened faster than thought. Her right hand whipped up in a calculated arc. Not a slap. A punch. Her knuckles connected squarely with my cheekbone, and a sharp crack cut through the room. A burst of blinding white light obliterated the antique wallpaper and oil paintings from my vision. I stumbled back, my body's training to stay upright overridden by shock. I crumpled onto the plush Persian rug, ears ringing with a high-pitched scream that wasn't mine. The pain was sharp and electric, but it came second to the disbelief. This wasn't an enemy soldier. This was my sister. Before I could process, she was on me. Her manicured nails dug into my hair, yanking my head back so hard I thought my scalp might tear away. "You think you matter?" she spat, her face twisted inches from mine. "You're nothing. Just a little toy soldier." Then she started dragging me. The coarse rug scraped my arms and legs as she hauled me toward a side service door. Her intent was clear, to get me out of sight before I ruined her perfect evening. My head throbbed, my cheek burned, but the humiliation was worse than the pain. The door swung open, and my mother, Diane Carter, stood there. Hope flared in me for one desperate heartbeat. "Mom will stop this. She'll help me." She didn't. Her eyes scanned the scene, me crumpled on the floor, Kendall looming above me, fists still tangled in my hair. Then she looked at Kendall, and in that cold, damning moment, she picked her side. "Lauren, my God, what did you do to make your sister this upset?" Her voice carried no concern for me, only accusation. She moved toward us, not to pull me up, not to reprimand Kendall, but to gently pry her fingers from my hair and soothe her arm, as if Kendall were the one who'd been wronged. "Come on now, sweetheart. she murmured to my sister. "Don't let her ruin your night." In that instant, the burning in my cheek and the fire along my scalp became meaningless. They were nothing compared to the pain that ripped through something deep and hidden inside me, a structural break in my soul. After years of slights, quiet betrayals, and being told I was less, the last unbroken piece of me snapped. I don't know how long I drove. The shimmering lights of downtown Dallas dissolved into the long, empty stretches of a Texas backroad. My grip on the steering wheel was steady, muscle memory from my time in uniform. But inside, my mind was a blizzard of static. When the fuel gauge dipped toward empty, I pulled into a lonely all-night gas station, its sign buzzing under the pale glow of a single lamp. My legs carried me into the restroom without thought. The air inside was stale, reeking faintly of bleach layered over years of neglect. A single flickering fluorescent bulb buzzed above me, throwing a harsh light onto the cracked mirror. For the first time since leaving the Magnolia Grand, I dared to look. The woman reflected back wasn't me. My left cheekbone had begun to swell, a grotesque bloom of purples and deep blues spreading beneath the skin. This wasn't the mark of service or honor. This was Kendall's stamp, branded on my face with our mother's silent consent. Staring at that bruise, I didn't see Lauren Carter, the veteran. I saw a frightened child, the same girl who'd always, deep down, believed the lie that it was somehow her fault. That punch wasn't a single act of violence. It was simply the most visible marker at the end of a long, winding road lined with invisible scars. Memories returned like shards of ice. I was 11, the Texas sun blistering the wooden dock on Lake Livingston during our family vacation. I had just reeled in a largemouth bass larger than the one Kendall had caught earlier. Her smile tightened. I saw the flicker of jealousy I knew too well. As I held my prize aloft, she moved, a hard shove, deliberate and mean, not playful. My feet slipped on the wet boards. I remember the sickening crack of my head striking a piling, then the cold shock of the lake swallowing me whole. I surfaced coughing water, the taste of blood in my mouth, a deep gash on my forehead bleeding freely. By the time our parents pulled me out, Kendall was already crying, her face the picture of concern. "She slipped," she sobbed. I tried to grab her, but she slipped. My mother wrapped a towel around me, glanced at the wound, then at me. "Lauren, you need to be more careful," she said with that familiar, weary disappointment. "You know how sensitive your sister is." They bandaged the cut, but they poured poison into my heart. The message was unmistakable. This is your fault. You provoked her. You deserved it. The years spun forward. Another memory, I was 16. Kendall, home from her first year of college, had taken Dad's car after drinking at a party. She clipped another vehicle just a few blocks from our house. No one was hurt, but the police arrived. My mother's grip on my arm was urgent, her voice a whisper. "You have to take the blame, Lauren. You don't have a license yet. It'll just be a fine." But Kendall? A DUI could destroy her scholarships. So I did. I stood in front of the officer, my heart pounding, and lied. I took the car for a joyride. Each word tasted like rust, another piece of my self-respect crumbling into dust. The Carter family rulebook was clear. My truth had a price, and I always paid it. Kendall's lies cost nothing. I drove away from the gas station to my tiny, silent studio apartment. The house I'd grown up in wasn't home anymore. Inside, I walked to the small wooden footlocker at the foot of my bed, the only thing of my father's I'd kept. He had built it himself. Inside, next to his worn Bible, were the letters he sent me while I was deployed in Iraq. My fingers, still trembling, found one and unfolded the brittle page. His strong handwriting filled it. "Always be the keeper of your own moral compass, Lauren. Whether in the fog of war or in the quiet of false peace, you must always know where your true north lies." Dad died before Kendall's ambition twisted her into who she is now, but his words were a lighthouse cutting through my storm. My true north was the truth. And I have to ask, have you ever had that moment? That sudden clarity when you realize that keeping silent to keep the peace isn't noble at all? It's not protecting anyone. It's betraying yourself. I finally understood. My silence hadn't saved the family. It had desecrated it. It betrayed my father's memory. And worst of all, it betrayed every version of me. The girl on the dock, the teen in front of the cop, the woman on the green room floor. I owed all of them the truth. The whole truth. Nothing less. When I folded Dad's letter and returned it to the box, the storm inside me hardened into something cold and sharp. Purpose. I didn't hesitate. The glowing digits on my phone read 2:24 a.m. I scrolled to the number and hit call. It rang twice before a low, groggy but professional voice answered. Michael Thorne. Michael, it's me, Lauren. Even I was surprised by my own tone. It didn't waver. It was cold, steady, and edged with steel. I need a lawyer. No tears. No unloading years of resentment. Just the bare facts, delivered like a field report. My sister assaulted me tonight. She's been using my military record for fraud, and I'm going to put an end to it. There was a pause, just the faint hiss of static. I pictured him sitting upright in bed, suddenly alert. Then his voice sharpened. Text me your address. I'll be there for breakfast. And Lauren, his tone dropped into something deadly certain. Do not speak to anyone in your family again. From this moment forward, they are the opposition. The word opposition hit me like a switch. It wasn't advice. It was an order. A mission parameter. It stripped away the grieving sister and reactivated the soldier. I had a new objective. By sunrise, long shadows stretched across my tiny apartment when Michael knocked. He stood in the doorway with a brown paper bag from Taco Haven and 2 oversized coffees. His dark suit was immaculate, as if he'd already stepped out of a courtroom. His eyes locked instantly on the bruise along my cheek, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of anger before he buried it under his usual calm. He said nothing about it. Instead, he stepped past me, set the food on my kitchen table, and flipped open his laptop. All right, Carter. He said my last name like a commanding officer. Not a slight, but a sign of respect, a summons to focus. Situation report. I need everything. Every lie, every time she used you, every questionable transaction you've seen. For the first time, I didn't tell my story as a victim. I reported it like an analyst delivering intel. I laid out the timeline. The players, the gala, the fake charity. The years of emotional coercion dressed up as business necessity. Methodical. Detached. Pushing the sting aside to deal in data. Michael typed rapidly, the steady rhythm of his keys the only sound besides my voice. He'd nod occasionally, his expression unreadable, locked into professional focus. When I finished, he glanced up. This charity Valor Alliance Fund. She claims it donates to specific causes. Which ones? I don't know, I admitted. That had always been Kendall's story to tell. He leaned back, sipping his coffee. Then let's find out, he said, eyes glinting with challenge. You're an analyst, Carter. Use your skills. That night, my apartment became a command center. The tacos were long gone. The glow of my laptop filled the space. My mind slipped into that familiar operational zone where feelings are dangerous and facts rule. I used the same open-source intel methods the Army had drilled into me, combing through public records, news archives, tax filings, and years of Valor Alliance social media posts. I cross-referenced names, dates, and donation claims. For hours, I found nothing but a flawless corporate shell. But I knew every fortress has a crack. I found mine buried in a small-town news piece about a charity 5K from just over 3 years ago. Valor Alliance was listed as a minor sponsor. I pulled the event's financial disclosures. There it was, one donation, $600. My blood went cold. 2 more hours of digging turned up nothing else. In 3 years of public fundraising, all while invoking my name and service, Kendall's flagship charity had made exactly one verifiable contribution. $600. My hands trembled as I sent Michael an encrypted email with the evidence. Minutes later, my phone rang. Good work, Lauren. Damn good work, he said, his voice sharp and energized. This is our first solid piece of evidence. Fraud. Now we follow the rest of the money. I know a guy. I stared at the flowcharts I'd mapped across my screen. His name's Silas Vaughn, Michael continued. Former federal investigator. They call him the Hound. Once he picks up a trail, he doesn't stop. He'll find every cent she's hidden. Michael promised to arrange a meeting. When I hung up, my dark laptop screen reflected a bruised face, but no longer the one dragged helpless across a floor. She was an operative with a target. The next day, I stepped into Michael's law office downtown. It wasn't some sterile glass and steel high-rise. It had weight, floor-to-ceiling wooden shelves sagging under legal tomes, the faint aroma of coffee and old paper. Through the tall window behind his desk, the pink granite dome of the Texas State Capitol stood like a silent sentry. Michael was waiting, and with him stood another man. "Lauren, this is Silas Vaughn," he said. Silas looked to be in his late 60s, with an unshakable calm that seemed to draw all the light toward him. He wore a soft, faded button-down shirt that looked like it had been through 100 wash cycles. His face was a map of deep lines carved by years of experience. He didn't smile, just gave me a short, deliberate nod. His eyes, sharp as a blade's edge, flicked to the bruise on my cheek for the briefest clinical moment before moving away, granting me the dignity of not staring. "Ms. Carter," Silas said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Michael tells me you've got a problem with creative accounting." His gaze stayed steady. "I'm not interested in family drama. I care about numbers, and numbers don't lie." There was something oddly comforting in his bluntness. No pity. No sentiment. He wasn't looking at me like a victim, but like a client with a problem that could be solved, a puzzle that needed the right hands. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of safety. I laid out everything I'd uncovered, my voice even as I walked them through the fraudulent charities paper trail. Michael took meticulous notes, cutting in with sharp legal questions. Silas just listened, still and focused, his eyes narrowing at key details, the way a predator waits for the exact moment to strike. When I finished, the room went quiet. I braced for the usual doubts, the condescending questions I'd grown used to. "Are you sure you're not exaggerating? Maybe you misunderstood?" But they never came. Michael looked me dead in the eye. "I believe you, Lauren," he said softly, but with absolute certainty. Then Silas spoke, his gravelly tone cutting through the quiet. "Kendall Carter," he murmured, almost to himself. "I've heard that name. There've been whispers for years. Now we've got somewhere to start digging." They didn't just believe me. They validated everything I'd suspected but been too beaten down to voice. That feeling of being truly heard, without judgment, washed over me like cool water on sunburned skin. It was something my own mother and sister had never once given me. The relief hit so hard it lodged a lump in my throat. Michael stood and crossed to a small, unremarkable mini-fridge in the corner. He pulled out 3 long-neck bottles beaded with condensation. Lone Star, Texas through and through. "It's been a long day," he said simply, handing one to me and one to Silas. He raised his bottle slightly. "We're a team now." We sat there in the golden slant of late afternoon sun, drinking mostly in silence, a lawyer, a former federal investigator, and a veteran. An unlikely trio, but in that sun-warmed office smelling faintly of old paper and coffee, I felt a bond stronger than blood. It was the camaraderie I'd missed from my service days, a chosen family bound not by birth, but by trust and shared mission. The fragile peace shattered with the shrill ring of my phone. My stomach nodded. The screen flashed, "Mom." Michael caught my eye and gave a small, deliberate nod toward the phone. I knew exactly what that meant. I answered and tapped speaker. "Lauren, where are you? Why haven't you called me back?" Diane's voice filled the room, dripping with a syrupy concern, so fake it made my skin crawl. "Kendall is absolutely devastated," she went on, layering her tone with theatrical distress. "You've hurt her so deeply. You need to come home right now. We are a family and we will fix this together." Beneath the performance, she was still trying to pull me back into the suffocating grip of family obligation. The room was silent except for her voice. "Mom," I said, my tone like ice. "I've hired a lawyer." The line went dead quiet. I could hear her inhale sharply before the mask cracked and her real voice, the venomous one, came through. "You dare," she hissed, her tone low and vibrating with fury. "After everything this family has done for you, you ungrateful child." Then came the sharp click of disconnection. The warmth of the beer, the safety of this room, gone in an instant. The cold shadow of my family had found me again, stretching across state lines and seeping into this sanctuary. Her words weren't closure. They were a warning shot. The next day, Kendall texted asking to meet for lunch. She chose the Kirby Lane Cafe, a bright, bustling Austin landmark famous for its pancakes and family-friendly charm. It was a calculated choice. Public. Neutral. A place I couldn't risk making a scene. When I arrived, I saw it for what it was, an ambush. Kendall wasn't alone. Diane sat beside her, gripping her daughter's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Kendall's eyes were artfully red and swollen, her expression worn and fragile, the perfect image of a woman undone. It was performance-level victimhood, honed to perfection. The waitress came and went, oblivious to the tension simmering in the booth. "Lauren," Kendall began, her voice trembling in a rehearsed fragility. "I was wrong. I lost control. I've been under so much pressure. You have no idea." My mother jumped in without missing a beat, her tone syrup-smooth. "Your sister loves you, Lauren. She just doesn't always know how to show it." She leaned forward, her eyes full of false pleading. "You can't destroy her life, her entire career, over one mistake." It was a coordinated strike, the good cop and the guilt cop. One dripping remorse, the other pressing the weight of family obligation. They wanted me to feel cruel, to believe I was the unfeeling aggressor punishing my poor, overwhelmed sister. But the girl who used to fall for this routine? She was gone. I sat perfectly still, my face unreadable, letting their little performance play out. When the warmth act failed to crack me, Kendall leaned in, lowering her voice like we were co-conspirators. "The company's hit a minor cash flow snag," she said, as though confessing something delicate. "It's temporary. I just need you to sign a few papers, a loan guarantee. Pure formality. It would steady everything, and we could put all of this behind us." Diane slipped in the finishing twist of the knife. "It's the least you can do to help your sister, Lauren. To keep our family together." The trap was plain. They didn't just want my silence anymore. They wanted my cooperation. They wanted me to cinch the rope around my own neck, using family loyalty as the noose. I looked past the trembling lip and the watery, artfully crafted eyes and locked onto Kendall's gaze. There was no remorse there. No sisterhood. Just cold, precise calculation. "No," I said. Quiet, but absolute. A wall she would never climb. I stood, left a $10 bill beside my untouched iced tea, and walked out without looking back. The air outside hit my lungs like a clean blade, sharp and bracing. I was about to pull out of the parking lot when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Miss Carter, we found something. You should sit down. SV, Silas Vaughn." My pulse kicked hard. I parked again, my hands trembling as I dialed. "Carter," came Silas's gravelly voice. "All business." "I'm sitting," I said, my throat tight. "We started tracing your sister's finances," he began, his tone measured. "Several fraudulent loans, just like you suspected. Kendall used your name and social security number to secure a substantial line of credit from a private lender." I closed my eyes, cold fury washing over me. Expected. Almost inevitable. But that's not all. His pause was heavy, stretching into silence. A significant portion, about $215,000, was immediately transferred into a secondary account. I swallowed hard. "The account," he continued, his voice stripped of emotion, "is in your mother's name. Diane Carter." Time stopped. The clatter of dishes from the cafe, the hum of traffic, even my own breath, gone. My heart, which had been pounding, felt like it locked up in my chest. Silas kept talking, his voice distant. "Our working theory? Your mother doesn't know where the money came from. Kendall probably told her it was an early inheritance, or a return on some investment. She's not just using you as cover, Lauren. She's using your mother as a vault." And just like that, something shattered inside me, but not the same way as before. This wasn't the breaking of a daughter's heart. This was the collapse of an illusion. Diane's blind, ferocious defense of Kendall wasn't just favoritism. It was survival instinct. She'd been conned too, made an unknowing accomplice in something ugly. My fight was no longer just about clearing my own name. It wasn't just the punch, or the lies, or the years of being made to feel small. It was about pulling my mother back from the brink, saving her from prison, from ruin Kendall had so casually set in motion. The weight on my shoulders multiplied. So did my resolve. I sat there in the Kirby Lane parking lot, the phone still pressed to my ear long after Silas had hung up. The cheerful noise of the cafe blurred into nothing. The edges of the world outside my windshield warped and dissolved. Kendall hadn't just betrayed me. She'd weaponized our mother, turned her into a pawn in a scheme that could destroy her life. The anger that had simmered in me for years crystallized into something colder. Not a scream, not a burst. A glacial certainty that sank into my bones. My palms slammed against the steering wheel. Once. Twice. Not rage, punctuation. A declaration. The battle lines had shifted. She had crossed into territory where there was no return. She had threatened the one person my instincts still fought to protect. The game was over. This was war. Without hesitation, I hit Michael's number. He picked up instantly. "Michael," I said, my voice stripped to a blade's edge. "Change of plans. This isn't a civil suit anymore. We're going criminal." I laid it out fast. Identity theft, wire fraud, and dragging our mother in as an accessory. We need to move before she buries the evidence or pins this on Mom. There was a pause, the sound of mental gears turning. "Understood, Lauren," he said finally, his tone as sharp as mine. "Solid copy. I'll start drafting the framework," Michael said. "But for a criminal case, financial records alone aren't enough. We need an inside source. A witness." The word witness hung in the air like the first crack of a gunshot. "There might be someone," Michael continued, his voice thoughtful. "A ghost? Cassandra Dwyer. She was Kendall's CO, her shadow. Resigned suddenly about half a year ago. No explanation and vanished. If anyone knows where all the bodies are buried, it's her. The problem is, she's completely off the grid." "Let me handle it," I said. The mission was already forming in my head. That night, my apartment became a digital hunting ground. I wasn't chasing Cassandra Dwyer, the corporate executive. I was hunting the ghost she'd become. I skipped the obvious routes, social media, LinkedIn. Those were for amateurs. Instead, I went deep into the hidden corners of the web, using the tools the Army had taught me to track people who didn't want to be found. I pieced together faint traces, a debit card charge for groceries in a rural market, an anonymous glowing review of a bed and breakfast, a property tax record under a brand new name. Thread by thread, the trail pulled me out of the city into the quiet folds of the Texas Hill Country. Then I had her, a new identity, a small town address, and a phone number. My pulse thudded in my ears as I stared at it. This was the pivot point. The strategy lived or died on this call. I took a steadying breath, the same way I used to before stepping through a breach, and dialed. 4 rings. I was about to hang up when a cautious female voice answered. "Hello. Ms. Dwyer," I said evenly, keeping my tone calm and non-threatening. "My name is Lauren Carter." Silence. I could hear her sharp inhale, the sudden tension in her voice. I don't know who that is." "You do," I said gently but firmly. "I know you left because you couldn't keep watching what Kendall was doing. I know you couldn't be part of it anymore. And now she's targeting my mother. I'm not letting that happen. I need your help, not for me, but for everyone she's ever deceived." There was a choked sound on the other end. A crack in the wall of her fear. When she spoke again, it was barely a whisper. "Meet me at the Blue Bonnet Cafe in Marble Falls. Come alone." The line went dead. My hand was steady as I lowered the phone. I had her. My first witness. My first real ally. The drive to Marble Falls was silent but heavy. The green hills rolled out around me, serene and indifferent, a stark contrast to the storm tightening inside my chest. The cafe was easy to spot, rustic, warm, the air thick with the smell of fresh pies and coffee. I picked a back booth, my nerves drawn taut. Minutes later, she walked in. Cassandra looked nothing like the sharp, confident Zoe I'd seen in company photos. She looked older, worn thin, with eyes that darted like she was always checking for exits. She slid into the booth, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Her answers to my questions were clipped, guarded. She was still in survival mode. So I shifted tactics. I pulled up the evidence Silas had uncovered, the fraudulent loan in my name, the hidden account in my mother's. I explained how Kendall had made Diane an unwitting accomplice. Cassandra stared at the screen. I saw it happen, the fear draining into grief, then curdling into anger. "She's a monster," she said finally, her voice shaking with years of unspoken truth. Not just with investors. She was stealing from the Veterans Fund, millions. She labeled it marketing or administrative overhead, but it was straight theft. I couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't be part of it. Her words poured out in a flood, years of guilt and disgust breaking loose. When she was done, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small silver USB drive. She pushed it across the table. "This is everything. Internal reports, hidden ledgers, emails. All the things she thought she'd erased. Use it. Stop her." I drove back to Austin with the drive in my pocket, feeling heavier than lead. By the time I reached Michael's office, night had swallowed the city. The glow from the Capitol dome stretched long shadows across the street. Inside, the air was thick with expectation. We plugged the drive into Michael's laptop. The three of us leaned in as file after file bloomed on the screen. It was all there. Tax fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud. Enough to bury Kendall for years. Silas's eyes moved with mechanical precision over the spreadsheets, tracing the money. Then he froze. "Here," he said, his voice low, tapping a folder on the screen. The folder was labeled simply, Project Liberty. My pulse spiked. I leaned in as Michael opened it, revealing a chain of heavily encrypted emails. "Let me," I said, sliding into the chair and taking control of the keyboard. Years of military signals intelligence training rose up like muscle memory. My fingers moved fast, slicing through encryption protocols until the coded strings unraveled into readable text. And then silence. We stared at the screen, our breath caught. It was worse than anything we'd imagined. The emails spelled out a conspiracy in black and white. Kendall had paid bribes to a senior Pentagon official in exchange for falsified documents, certifying that Valor Alliance Innovation cybersecurity tech had been field-tested in active operations overseas. A complete fabrication, one that had allowed her to land millions in sensitive federal contracts. Michael leaned back like the wind had been knocked out of him. His face was pale. "This isn't just financial fraud," he said. "This is a federal offense. Treason adjacent. She's in FBI territory now." Silas's jaw was locked tight. "Game's changed," he said in that gravelly tone. "She's not just up against the IRS. She's staring down the Bureau." The case had just gone nuclear. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was national security. Cassandra hadn't handed us a weapon. She'd dropped a warhead in our laps. Michael's hands moved over the keyboard, but he wasn't drafting a lawsuit. He was composing a notice to Kendall's legal team, not a threat, but a final invitation. A mediation. One last chance to settle before Project Liberty went straight to the U.S. Attorney's office. It was checkmate in the making. When he hit send, I didn't feel victorious. Just cold certain. The final battle was coming. We sat in the largest conference room in Michael's firm, the dark wood paneling giving it the gravitas of a war council. I was on his right, Silas on his left. The air was heavy with that quiet, electric tension that comes just before impact. The door opened. Kendall didn't walk in, she arrived. A performance of control in every step. 3 lawyers flanked her, all in immaculate suits, their leather briefcases gleaming. She wore a pristine white dress, the kind of symbolic choice you make when you want to look untouchable. Her eyes locked on me, skipping over the men beside me entirely. "Well," she said brightly, voice pitched to fill the room, "I'm so glad you decided to be reasonable, Lauren. I'm sure we can clear up this little misunderstanding quickly and move on." She still thought she was the hunter. She didn't see the cage door closing behind her. Michael's tone was calm, surgical. "We are not here to discuss a misunderstanding," he said, his eyes on her lead counsel, a silver-haired man who carried himself like he owned the table. "We are here to address felony identity fraud." He slid a neat stack of documents across the mahogany. The papers landed with a soft but final thud. "This," he continued, "is the paperwork for a $213,000 loan taken from a private lender in my client's name, using her social security number. without her knowledge or consent. The silver-haired lawyer glanced at the documents, sighed, and slid them back. I'm sure this was some informal family agreement my client is now reinterpreting, he said smoothly. Michael didn't even blink. Next, he said with the kind of quiet certainty that makes people lean in. Silas reached forward and placed a thicker folder on the table. This, Michael said, is a forensic accounting report on the Valor Alliance Veterans Fund, prepared by Mr. Vaughn. It outlines 3 years of aggressive fundraising, totaling over $4.3 million. The energy in the room shifted. Kendall's lawyers no longer looked smug. They looked irritated, the first hairline cracks appearing in their control. Michael's voice didn't waver. It just kept coming, steady as artillery fire. It also shows, Michael continued, a single donation in that time, $600 to a local marathon. Every other cent, as Mr. Vaughn's report meticulously documents, was funneled through shell corporations into Kendall Carter's personal accounts. Kendall's face stayed composed, but I saw it, the tiniest fracture. Her manicured index finger began an impatient, rhythmic tap against the table. Tap, tap, tap. Her lead attorney caught the tell and shot her a warning look. And finally, Michael said, lowering his voice in a way that made the air tighten, we have Project Liberty. He lifted a small remote and aimed it at the presentation screen. The black display flickered to life, filling with the decrypted text of Kendall's emails. Certain words glared in bold like weapons, Pentagon, bribe, falsified documents, alongside the name of a senior government official. A digital confession. The effect was immediate. It felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Kendall's lawyers froze, their practiced composure draining into an ashen stillness. Even their expensive educations and years of courtroom gamesmanship meant nothing against raw, irrefutable proof. And Kendall, for the first time in my life, she lost control. The mask shattered. Her mouth hung open, her lipstick suddenly garish against skin gone pale. You, she stammered, pointing at me with a trembling finger. Where did you get that? Panic lit her eyes as her empire cracked around her in real time. Then survival instinct took over. She lurched to her feet, eyes locking on the discreet camera her own team had set up to record the meeting. Do you see? She cried into the lens, her voice breaking in perfect, stage-trained hysteria. Do you see how far she'll go? My own sister, jealous for years, fabricating all of this just to destroy me and my company. She wasn't denying the evidence. She was reframing it, trying to spin the entire meeting into a viral soundbite for the court of public opinion. It was manipulative, theatrical, and fatally stupid. Her attorney was already shaking his head, urging her to sit. Too late. Michael let her finish, then spoke in a tone so calm it cut sharper than any shout. Thank you, Ms. Carter. This recording, in which you do not deny a single allegation and instead launch a personal attack on my client, will be an excellent exhibit of motive and lack of remorse before a federal grand jury. Her practiced pity smile froze halfway. The trap had sprung, and she'd lit the fuse herself. After Kendall's implosion, I didn't feel victorious. No rush. No catharsis. Just a hollow exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your bones after a long campaign. I drove back to my apartment in a haze, pulled the blinds, and collapsed into a dreamless 14-hour sleep. When I woke, the world had shifted. My phone buzzed with alerts, headlines screaming about the Valor Alliance scandal, and the tech CEO facing federal charges. Investors were fleeing. The board was in free fall. It had all gone according to plan. And yet, reading it, I felt no joy. Just a quiet sadness for the permanent fracture of what once passed for a family. A few days later, Diane came to my apartment. No call. No warning. Just a small, frail figure in my doorway, the manipulator stripped away, replaced by a grieving, desperate woman. She began crying before she spoke, her whole frame shaking. You have to stop this, Lauren, she pleaded, her voice breaking. You have to take it all back. She's still your sister. Our family, our name, they'll be destroyed. I looked at her, really looked, and the years of anger drained out, leaving only a deep, aching pity. Mom, I said gently, Kendall destroyed this family a long time ago. I guided her inside, settling her on my small sofa. I'm not doing this to hurt her, I said softly. I'm doing this to stop her from hurting anyone else, including you. Then I told her everything. The fraudulent loan. The hidden account in her name, holding $213,000 in stolen funds. I explained to my mother that Kendall hadn't just used me as a shield, she'd used her as a vault, placing her squarely in legal danger. Diane's tear-filled eyes widened, disbelief giving way to horror. The truth, in all its sharp, merciless detail, finally landed. I watched it crush what little was left of her spirit. She didn't argue. She didn't defend Kendall. She just sat there, small and hollow. And for the first time, I believed she truly saw the predator her favorite daughter had become. When she left, a strange clarity settled over me. I knew what had to be done. I sat at my table with a pen and 2 sheets of paper, my new battle maps, my new borders. The first letter was to Kendall, now under house arrest in her multi-million-dollar mansion, awaiting trial. I didn't fill it with rage or accusations. There was no point. I wrote one quiet line. I hope that one day you find some peace in the truth. The second was to my mother. That one was harder. I told her I loved her, and a part of me always would. But I also told her I needed distance, time to heal. I wouldn't cut her off entirely, but I could no longer allow myself to be pulled back into the toxic orbit of their world. This wasn't a wall of anger. It was one of survival. Sealing those envelopes was one of the hardest and most freeing things I've ever done. A few days later, I found myself walking the grounds of the Texas Capitol, drawn to the Vietnam Veterans Monument. My fingers traced the carved names in the granite. I thought about honor, sacrifice, truth. I realized I'd fought a war too, not in the deserts of Iraq, but here in my own home, for the sovereignty of my own soul. And in that stillness, I understood that to truly win, I didn't need to hate Kendall. The only person I needed to forgive was myself. Forgive myself for staying silent. Forgive myself for believing I wasn't enough. Forgive myself for thinking love was something I had to earn. I thought of the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I couldn't change Kendall. I couldn't change Diane. But I could change myself, where I drew my lines, how I responded, and who I allowed into my life. That was the wisdom I'd paid dearly to learn. It wasn't about beating them. It was about finally living for me. A year passed. Texas turned through its seasons, and so did my life. The wheels of justice turned slow but steady. Kendall was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and bribery, sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Diane avoided prosecution thanks to her cooperation, but had to repay every cent of the laundered money. The civil suit awarded me a $284,000 settlement. The number on the check didn't matter. The real victory was freedom, from their shadows, their lies, the weight of a life that had never been mine. I bought a small house on a quiet Austin street. A screened porch. A backyard big enough for tomato plants and herbs. Safe. My own. I didn't go back to the army. My war was different now. I put the rest of the money and my time into a new mission. Working as a peer support counselor with Grace After Fire, a Texas nonprofit helping women veterans navigate the difficult terrain of civilian life. I didn't lead missions anymore. I listened. I listened to stories of service, of loss, of invisibility after the uniform came off. I helped translate military skills into resumes. I sat with them through the invisible wounds no scan could capture. In their words, I heard echoes of my own, and I realized Kendall had been right about one thing. My story did have power, not to exploit, but to connect, to heal. A few months ago, a young woman walked into the center. Timid, haunted eyes. She told me about her older brother, a charming, successful entrepreneur, and how behind closed doors, he used her, belittled her, twisted reality until she doubted her own sanity. Everyone thinks he's a saint, she whispered. Sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy. I saw myself in her, the version from a year ago, drowning in someone else's story. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't give her instructions. I just said softly, I believe you. And sometimes, That's where the healing starts. I met her gaze and gave her the one thing I had once needed more than anything. "You're not crazy," I told her softly but with conviction. "And you're not alone." I wrote Michael Thorne's phone number on a small scrap of paper and slid it across the table. The cycle of silence had been broken for me, and now I was helping someone else break theirs. Tonight, I'm sitting on my back porch. A blank notebook rests on the table in front of me, a pen beside it. A warm Texas breeze stirs the oak leaves overhead. My relationship with Diane is slowly, carefully rebuilding, shaped by the healthy boundaries I've learned to draw. We speak once a week, not about the wreckage behind us, but about simple things, the progress of the tomato plants, the book she's reading. I haven't seen Kendall. I don't know if I ever will. And I've realized it no longer matters. Her story and mine have finally split for good. I open the notebook. The first page is clean, a white field waiting. I pick up the pen, its weight grounding me. The scent of jasmine drifts in from my neighbor's fence. And I begin to write. My name is Lauren Carter. Not the version my sister fabricated. Not the version my mother wished into being. My own. A story about shattering silence. About wounds that don't come from enemy fire, but from the people who were meant to love you most. And about a soldier who finally found her peace, not under a foreign sun, but here in the quiet green of her own backyard. That first sentence, "My name is Lauren Carter," is more than words. It's a vow that I will never be silenced again. And I know somewhere out there, some of you have your own stories, ones that were pushed down, dismissed, or overshadowed. If you're ready, I invite you to share a piece of it. Because your voice deserves to be heard.